Tonight's episode comes from J Sutton's The UK's Worst, a compilation of true crime cases committed by some of the UK's most dangerous criminals. Tonight we'll be reading about Anthony Arkwright. This book is now available on Amazon. Natural Life. As of the 31st of December 2021, there were 8,626 prisoners serving indeterminate sentences in the UK. These are sentences with no end date. They are not given as commonly as other sentences and are reserved for the most serious crimes. A prisoner can be convicted with an indeterminate sentence if the imprisonment assures the public's protection from an otherwise very dangerous person. An imprisonment for public protection sentence, an IPP, or a real life sentence with no date for release, also known as a whole life order, whole life tariff, or natural life sentence. There is a marked difference in the frequency males are handed an indeterminate sentence compared to females. In the UK currently 8,297 of these prisoners are male and only 329 are female. Throughout the cases you will see the term released on licence for those offenders who have previous convictions. Licence is essentially a probation period where a prisoner is released. They may have a portion of their sentences still remaining to be served. They will spend this remaining time on probation where certain conditions and restrictions will be placed on them. These conditions will require them to attend appointments with a probation officer and will have to adhere to the expectations placed on them. Breaching any of these licence conditions, depending on the severity of the breach, can result in the licence being revoked. They may be required to complete the remaining sentence back in prison custody. At times, a breach may just result in an extension of their probation period. There are different types of licences in the UK. These are known collectively as ancillary orders, and the type of licence order given to the offender is determined by the type of offence committed. Those who are deemed serious offenders do not get released on standard licence conditions. Depending on the type of crime they have committed, they may be given a violent offender order, a VOO, a serious crime prevention order, an SCPO, or even a sexual harm prevention order, an SHPO. These orders are reserved for those who are deemed to be a high risk of danger to the general public. The court must be able to prove that the order will protect the public by preventing, restricting, or disrupting involvement by the person in serious crime in England and Wales, Crown Prosecution Service 2022-2018, before it will be issued. As reoffending rates are higher in those who commit serious and more complex crimes, there are special teams allocated in the community to monitor their behaviour and keep track of their day-to-day activities. The study carried out for the Ministry of Justice identified that offenders who had a more complex offending history, as measured by their corpus rates, were more likely to be convicted on release. In contrast, offenders serving their first prison sentence were less likely to be reconvicted. Brunton Smith Hopkins, 2013. Due to the increased likelihood of recidivism occurring in serious and serial offenders, stricter conditions will be put in place restricting what that person can and cannot do in their daily life. Although many measures are put into place to try and deter or prevent them from committing crime again, there are those who will still reoffend in the same serious and harmful ways. When this does happen, the judge may consider putting them on a whole life order with no option to appeal to the parole board. This guarantees public safety and makes sure the person cannot be released on licence again. To read more about the topics discussed above, please visit the reference section at the end of the book. Below are the stories of some of those prisoners living and deceased. This book series covers UK cases only, features criminals that have been sentenced to whole life orders. This is book 1 in the series and contains the stories of 4 criminals: Anthony Arkwright, Anthony Ayres, Anthony Hardy, aka the Canton Ripper, and Anthony Russell. Anthony Arkwright, 1988. Status: spree killer, burglar, dangerous offender. Born 1967. Charges: 3 counts of murder, whole life tariff. Convicted July 1989. Locations of crimes: Warth-upon-Dean, South Yorkshire. Length of spree: 56 hours. Anthony Arkwright carried out a 56-hour murder spree from Friday, August the 26th to Monday, August the 29th in 1988 in Warth-upon-Dean, South Yorkshire, UK, in a series of what he explained as revenge attacks. His first victim was his own grandfather, Stanislav Pudokas, whom he believed had been having an incestuous relationship with his mother, and that Anthony himself was a product of this relationship. He had been teased about this at school and had built up a resentment towards both his mother and grandfather. Anthony's solicitor, Steve Smith, made a comment on his thoughts about the bullying Anthony experienced. He said, "I think Tony had a lot of difficulty when he was a kid at school, because of course these sorts of things leak, and kids are very, very cruel. They They didn't stop the rumours or do anything to make his life any easier. When Anthony was much younger, his mother had left. He had very mixed emotions about the situation and became very bitter. This was apparent in his behaviour growing up. According to his barrister, James Chadwin, Anthony had shown signs of disturbance since his mother left him when he was 4 years old. At times, Arkwright wasn't cared for properly, and he would also act out, which resulted in him being put into a state care. Arkwright got expelled from schools for a variety of unacceptable behaviours, things such as fighting, robbery and vandalism. He spent most of his younger years in state homes, state custody brothels and the care of local charities. By the time he was a teenager, he was a familiar face to the local police. They had many complaints over the years of his disruptive and destructive behaviours. There were more than a few local residents who had altercations with Arkwright before he had even reached adulthood. He received a 30-month sentence for much of this behaviour. According to the police, he was well known for falling out with local people, for his fractious relationship with the neighbourhood. Arkwright could fall out with his very best friend. He was an individual who was very volatile in relationships. Detective Chief Inspector Burdis, 1989. Anthony's brother publicly stated that a lot has been documented about my brother, but none of it has ever come close to unveiling the truth. Our parents hid the abuse of their children well, be that mental or physical. Both played a massive role in what eventually occurred. Of course, nothing justifies those cowardly, horrific murders, and nor should it. I would have preferred a rope as his punishment than a lifetime in prison. Pete Arkwright, Saturday, 13th of November 2021. He expressed a lot of anger towards his family over these issues, especially when he had been drinking alcohol. Arkwright liked to have a drink and would go out drinking and attending nightclubs and parties. He also worked a labouring job with metal, which was hard work and had early starts. Arkwright struggled to get into work on time due to his lifestyle. The morning of August 26, 1988 was no different. Arkwright arrived to work late again. Friday, August 26, 1988, day 1. It was Friday afternoon. On August 26th, Arkwright was making his way to his grandfather's allotment. He was very drunk after an afternoon of drinking heavily, drowning his sorrows. His day had not gone to plan, just like his life had not gone to plan. Everything he did seemed to go wrong today. Wasn't a day that would change. He was sick of it and angry. He was in a foul mood, more than normal after just being fired for poor attendance and lateness. This was his excuse for drinking. He decided to drown his sorrows. After drinking and playing the mental blame game with himself, he had gone to his grandfather's home, initially to have it out with him, but he wasn't there. Arkwright knew he would be at his allotment, so went there instead. Once he arrived at the allotment and located his grandfather, he attacked him. He stabbed him violently in the neck, making his grandfather unable to move. Anthony went on to hit him with an axe and again with a 14-pound hammer till he had succumbed to his injuries. Once Arkwright saw his grandfather was dead, he dragged his body into a shed and locked it in there. His body was not discovered until the 1st of September, 6 days after he was killed. After killing his grandfather, he made his way back to his grandfather's house, stealing $3,000 from the home, money that he knew his grandfather kept there. There was potentially another victim, his grandfather's housekeeper, Elsa Conradite, who was 72 at the time of her death. She was due to be at the home around the time Arkwright would have been there. She died roughly within the same time proximity that the events of Arkwright's spree killing occurred. After leaving his grandfather's property, Anthony went back to his flat. He had arranged to go out with some friends, so went to get ready. Once he had met up with a friend and his cousin, they went out to a local nightclub. They stayed there until closing and parted ways to go home. By the time Anthony arrived at his flat, it was just coming up to 3 a.m. of the 27th of August. Instead of getting ready to sleep, Arkwright had other ideas, another victim in mind. Anthony's third victim was Raymond Ford, who endured an extreme violent attack at the hands of Arkwright. Saturday, August 27th, 1988, day 2. The attack on Raymond Ford occurred at or around 3 a.m. on Saturday, the 27th of August, resulting in a serious case of overkill. According to Arkwright, a few days before this, he had broken into Raymond Ford's home and stolen some items. He had become paranoid and was going back to the property to cover up anything that might be evidence he was there. Arkwright's flat was in the same building as Ford's, so it wasn't hard for Arkwright to get to. It would take only a few minutes, if that, to get between each flat. Arkwright was mostly naked when he arrived at Raymond Ford's flat, wearing only a pair of boxer shorts and a mask with a cartoon devil face on it. Anthony makes his way through the communal hallway to Ford's flat, equipped with a knife. Once he gets inside the property, he finds Raymond Ford there. Raymond, seeing a partially naked Arkwright trespassing on his property, causes him to confront Arkwright. In the confrontation, Anthony stabbed Ford anywhere between 300 to 500 times. He gutted Raymond completely, leaving intestines strewn around the lifeless body. Raymond's body was not discovered for 3 days, but when it was discovered, the level of brutality was very clear. PC David Winter was at the crime scene of Raymond Ford's murder. He described the level of depravity that Arkwright had shown to his victim. There was blood on the walls. I opened the bedroom door, thought there was this pile of clothes in the corner, but there was his body underneath this, and all the bits and pieces I'd seen in the hallway. That was all his organs. He'd removed just about every organ in his body. PC Winter, 1988. After killing Ford, Arkwright made his way back to his flat to get some sleep, but it wouldn't be for long. Around 6:30 to 7 a.m. roughly, 4 hours after he committed the murder of Raymond, there was a loud banging at his door. As he opened the door, he saw a police officer who began to explain they were there to speak to him about a burglary happened in the building. They had information that he was responsible for it, so he was arrested on suspicion of burglarizing Raymond's flat. This information had come from Raymond. It was something he had reported to the police a day or two beforehand. Arkwright was taken down to the station and held to be questioned. As of yet, Raymond Ford's body had not been discovered by the police. They had not spoken to him since he had made the report of burglary. They had no idea that while Arkwright was in their custody for robbing Ford, he had in actual fact killed him as well, let alone knowing about the other two victims, Stanislav and Elsa. After booking him in and questioning him, he gave no indication that he had just committed 3 murders. Once they had completed their investigation and questioning, they had no reason to hold Arkwright in custody. Eventually, after the police had finished talking to him, they bailed him. He was released with bail conditions to appear at court the following week for the burglary of Ford's home. Anthony was held for a total of 12 hours, accounting for most of the day, and released at the evening approached around 7 p.m. Upon his release, Anthony went back to the flats. He went to his flat first, he showered, watched some TV and ate. While at home, he decided it was time to confront another neighbour he had a problem with. This time it would allegedly be over cigarettes. Sunday, August the 28th, 1988, day 3. At around midnight, in the very early hours of August the 28th, Arkwright made his way to his neighbour's home. Unbeknownst to his neighbour, he would become Arkwright's next victim. The third victim was a man named Marcus Law, a man that Anthony knew as one of his neighbours. Marcus lived in a bungalow next to the flats that Arkwright lived in. He was a disabled man who was in a wheelchair and would often be seen talking with the locals outside of his home. Just after midnight, early on Sunday, August the 28th, 1988, Anthony broke into the home of Mr. Law and viciously attacked him, stabbing Mr. Law 70 times in what he called a revenge attack over cigarettes. Like the attack on Ford, this was just brutal and unnecessary. It was no secret that he didn't like Marcus that much. Arkwright had been seen with him arguing in the past. It seemed more that Arkwright would tolerate Marcus. This tolerance was weakening rapidly. Arkwright had begun to despise Marcus beyond the point of just dislike. On August 27th, 1988, on the evening before he attacked and killed Marcus, he was drunk and had told another neighbour called Neil Hurst he was going to kill that bastard. He said to Neil after seeing Marcus passing him. At the time, he was on the way to a nightclub with friends to continue drinking. Once Law was dead, Arkwright gutted him and mutilated Mr. Law's corpse, gouging out his eyeballs and replacing them with unlit cigarettes. He also wedged cigarettes into the ears, nostrils and mouth of Marcus Law. Arkwright was quoted saying that Marcus Law looked like a birthday cake. Marcus's body had been mutilated so much that Arkwright had even put a crutch through the hole made in Marcus's stomach, which was by then completely empty after Arkwright had gutted and mutilated him, removing all of his organs. He was arrested on suspicion of Marcus Law's murder just after midday that same day. The time in between him being questioned about burglarising Raymond's flat and him being arrested for the murder of Marcus Law, PC Winter, a police officer, had discovered Raymond Ford's body on a routine follow-up about the burglary. After the officer's initial inquiries into the murder of Raymond revealed that him and Arkwright had friction, he began to suspect that Anthony had something to do with Raymond's death. He decided to visit Arkwright's grandfather to get some idea of what Arkwright was like as a person. Elsa Conradite's body was still laying in Stanislav Pudakad's home, undiscovered, as PC Winter pulled up to the property. PC Winter had discovered Raymond's body earlier. On finding Mr. Ford's body in such a horrific state, it shocked him. He didn't want to give whoever did this another chance to do it again, someone else, so he was keen to find whoever was responsible. PC Winter arrived at the home of Stanislav on Ruskin Drive in Mexibra. Upon arrival, Winter noticed that something seemed off about the property. Winter found an unlocked window and gained entry to the home, where he was met by the dead body of Elsa. Shortly after discovering her body on the same day, Stanislav's body was found by authorities in the allotment shed. By this point, they knew that Arkwright was an extremely disturbed and dangerous man, a man who had killed 4 people in the space of 2 days. Although Arkwright did not get convicted for Elsa Conradite's murder, the judge asked that he be left on the record that he was the only suspect in that case, and is the only one record who is responsible for and is the only one on record who is responsible for her death, something Arkwright has alluded to himself in comments he has made. Arkwright has indicated to the police that he did have a full victim during a card game. While being held for questioning regarding Marcus Law's murder, he got chatting to officers. During the card game, Arkwright made the passing comment, "One you've got, 3 to come." But despite the evidence and this supposed admission, there still is no conviction against him for the murder of Elsa Conradite. The judge felt that it should be on the file that Anthony Arkwright was and is the only suspect in her murder. Because of this, the judge ordered that the case of Elsa Conradite was to lie on file. He was sentenced to serve a minimum of 25 years and a maximum whole life order. He has currently served 33 years in prison. As of August 2022, he is still incarcerated indefinitely and will never be released. That's all for tonight. Night, night, sleep tight. Don't let the bed